Hello and welcome to Forever Rugby on Fair Sports for today's preview of the second Currie Cup semi-final, which will take place down in Durban between the Sharks and the Griquas. The Griquas, after a fantastic group stage run, have managed to find themselves in the semi-finals, finishing third on the log, and they will travel down to Durban to take on the Sharks, where the last time these two met at the same stadium. The Griquas actually managed to win despite a whole flurry of yellow cards. And as a result, I think Scott Matty and his team will be quietly thinking that they can actually do a job and potentially make a Currie Cup final, which a year ago he probably would have said was pretty close to being impossible. But to do so, they will have to play what is a pretty stacked and a pretty confident Shark side at home at the Shark Tank. Before we look at the two teams, a couple of interesting decisions, quite a lot of continuity and some big names, particularly in the Sharks, but also some interesting calls, especially at lock for the Sharks. Please do smash a like on the video and subscribe to the channel as well. As always, a big thank you to Manscaped, who are currently supporting the channel. You can get yourself 20% off as well as free shipping using the code FOREVER on manscaped.com. They are the #1 brand for men's below the waist grooming needs, and we've got all the right tools for your family jewels. Go and check out manscaped.com. They've just launched in South Africa and is available in South Africa, 20% off as well as free shipping using the code FOREVER. Go and check them out and show them support, because they are showing us some support. Now, in terms of the teams for tomorrow's clash, probably quite a lot of obvious picks in terms of the Sharks as well as the Griquas. I mean, far less surprises in the Griquas side, but an interesting selection or two for the Sharks. And I think there are a couple of players which I think will have to have big games if either of their sides are going to try and sort of pull something else special. You know, the Griquas are definitely up against it. We're talking about the last season's finalists in the Sharks, and a team which I think, you know, on another day probably could have beaten the Bulls. And they'll feel they've got something to prove a little bit in terms of always coming quite close, but having not quite been able to get over the line with the Sharks. But in terms of the teams, this is how they line up. We'll start with the home side, which is the Sharks. And immediately, quite a big decision to start into Tuka Mkunu, who I think is someone who has struggled a little bit at scrum time and hasn't always managed to sort of find that front foot ascendancy. He's sort of had his moments last week against the Western Province, but sometimes does struggle a little bit up front. Kieran van Vuuren, Kutam Tuna is not a surprise at all. Those two have been very, very solid and consistent performers, and Kieran van Vuuren, with Faison Barton not being currently available, has sort of been putting in quite a solid shift, really, and I think sort of trying to sort of put his hand up and to say that he's not going to get forgotten about when Bongi Manambi does make that move towards the end of the year. But a very interesting call to see Gebrand Grobler get back to this weekend. We saw him last weekend. I thought he was very impressive at line-out time. He does get back tomorrow, but Leroux Roots is also going to partner him. So, I mean, we're talking about big, bulky forwards there. Leroux Roots is somebody who's become very, very good ball carrier. You can see that sort of conditioning program that the Sharks did put him on is starting to pay dividends. He looks in far better shape than when he arrived there. I mean, we know he's got the size and he's got the ability to get over the advantage line, but, you know, he just didn't have the sort of conditioning to be able to last a full game. So it's good to see that he's back and playing some very, very good rugby. Dylan Richardson comes into the side and will be a menace over the ball. We know Dylan Richardson. He's one of those people that will cherish these sort of occasions. You know, come with the man. He's that type of character. He'll definitely try and get into the faces of the Griquas and try and sort of stamp his authority at the breakdown and try and become quite a nuisance at breaking down play. Expect a lot of tackles from him and expect a lot of sort of work over the ball. Henko Fente, Pepsi Buthelezi will be the rest of the loose trio. I mean, Pepsi Buthelezi is in some fantastic form and is one of the sort of the number 8s pushing to be that sort of next generation eighth man for the Springboks, and I think his captaincy as well has been exemplary so far for the Sharks. So it'll be fantastic to see him try and lead his side into a Currie Cup final and then lead his side in a Currie Cup final. The halfback pairing will be Sanela Nahamba as well as Lionel Cronje. Lionel Cronje playing just far too well. Before, I think last weekend we struggled a little bit. But he's a mercurial player, which means that, you know, if he pitches up tomorrow and plays a good game, chances are the Sharks will win. He's that type of player. He's a game winner on his day, but somebody who when he's a bit off can sometimes struggle. So that will probably be something that the Griquas will try and target to try and get him off his game and not let him settle. Sanela Nahamba, I thought, responded very well last weekend to not being recalled to the Springbok squad. And put in a very, very good first half. Faded a little bit in the second half, but I thought it was very impressive in the first 40 minutes. Thake Abrahams has sort of burst onto the scene, will continue to try and make a bit of an impression on the wing. Yao Penkle, the box squad member, is on the other wing. The centre pairing of Marius Lowe and Werner Kok is fairly sort of predictable. Werner Koch, I think, has been fantastic at outside centre. Marius Lowe's probably got something a little bit to prove in terms of going into the URC, in terms of trying to ensure that he's still part of the Sharks' plans moving forward. Curran Bosch has had to move to full back to accommodate Lionel Cornier, and has actually probably played quite a lot of or much better rugby there, I've found, and a bit of a sort of crisis of identity, I think, at the moment for Curran Bosch in terms of where does his long-term future lie. Is he a fly half? Is he a full back? Because he was being backed at fly half until Lionel Cornier came back and is starting to sort of outplay him. Off the bench, we're going to see Dan Jooste, Kwesi Mana, and Lawrence Adrianse. So they'll be very important in the second half to try and see out the rest of the game. Reniel Hugo, Temalani Boli, some two big bulky forwards that can cover lock in terms of Reniel Hugo, and Temalani Boli covers lock as well as sort of anywhere in the back row. So he's a very useful player to come off the bench. Cameron Wright has looked pretty good when he's had an opportunity. Jeremy Ward brings a very sharp defense, quite a lot of physicality, and then Anthony Folnick is pretty much a raw sort of pace finisher, very devastating player, especially on the counter-attack or if you give him any space. So it's a very, very good Sharks side. It's quite a similar Sharks side to the one that gave the British and Irish Lions a little bit of issues in that second test. In terms of the Griquas side, this is how they line up. Quite a lot of continuity, quite a lot of the big names being included. So if we're looking at the front row, Moxon Coley has been fantastic throughout the season, very consistent player. He's next to Janke Ace and Eric de Jager in the front row, and they'll have a big job in terms of trying to give that backline of theirs, which has some very exciting players, a bit of front football to try and sort of exploit the Sharks and have a go at them. The two sort of tight five second rowers will be RJ Smith and Stefan Villenser, and then Gideon van der Merwe, Henry Sergel, and Ruan Steenkamp. They will be massive tomorrow because it's a very, very good Sharks loose trio, and those three will need to sort of pretty much outplay their opposite number in order to try and give the Griquas away into the game. Gideon van der Merwe versus Dylan Richardson is probably one of the best battles of the day to look out for. Ruan Steenkamp has been very solid as the captain. Stefan Ungar and George Whitehead continue their combination. They are so settled, those two, playing together. They play very, very well together. Stefan Ungar has got a little bit of a sort of a short temper, and he sort of needs to control that head of his, but when he starts plays well, him and George Whitehead can definitely sort of do a very good job. The two wings will be Edwin Cater, Daniel Cassenda. Edwin Cater up against the side he will be joining at the end of the Currie Cup for next season, and will be wanting to try and sort of impress against his soon-to-be side. Jonathan Frankie brings in a lot of experience, and Chris Hollis will be outside him. Ashton Davids, who's really sort of featured very well at fullback for Griquas this season. Then off the bench, Alondre van Rooyen, Andrew Beerwinkel, and Jano Boerta. Cameron Lindsay brings in a lot of experience off the bench. Johan Monson, and then Regan Oranje, Tennis to be an Edoris Ardensa will be the backline replacements. Do not write off this Griquas side, because whenever they're up against it, whenever they are written off, they seem to just do something. And they're a side which has been giving opposition a tough time, even if they're not getting the results. The difference is this season they've been starting to finally get those results. They're always a tough team to play. They'll sort of never die wondering. Very physical, very in your face, and they make their opposition work for their points. And the difference this season is that they've scored some points of their own and actually managed to sort of turn those games where they've played well and got nothing into points, which is why they find themselves going down to Durban as third place finishers in the group stages. In theory, you look at these teams and you think the Sharks should do a job, but I do think this Griquas side are up for it, and I think that they do have the potential to potentially upset the Sharks. So I want to go Sharks by 5, but I'd love to see the Griquas pull out a bit of an upset, and how cool would it be to see the Griquas running out in a week's time in the Currie Cup final. Let me know what your score predictions are down in the comments below. Smash a like on the video. Do subscribe to the channel. My name is Stephen. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll chat to you soon.